Take a look at some of the different preferences there are for managing and configuring your massive meter and your massive meter bridge. In the massive meter plugin, there is the little gear icon, which opens up the various preferences for the plugin. And in the massive meter bridge application, under setups, there's preferences. It also exists under the standard application menu. If you look at the two sets of preferences, most of them are very similar. There's a couple that are specific to the plugin and that aren't used by the application. Here in the plugin, the first preference we have is the system name. This is what is used to identify the system. It defaults to massive meter. You can reassign that to whatever you want, and this is on a per Pro Tools system that's saved with the operating system. So if you have multiple computers in a studio or multiple studios, you might start naming your systems like Studio 1 Dialogue, Studio 1 Music, Studio 2 Music, so that when you find them in the massive meter bridge application, you will be able to know which one is which. Underneath that, we have a custom track name. When you instantiate the massive meter plugin on a track, it inherits or it gets the track name of Pro Tools. If you want to create a custom name, you can override that here. To clear the custom name, you just delete the name or set it back to what the Pro Tools name is. The next one is the network interface. This allows you to pick which network interface the massive meter and the massive meter bridge communicate with each other over. It's recommended that you use the hardwired network interface for best performance. Wi-Fi will have a little more latency. So if you click on the network interface, you'll see the different interfaces available on my system. I've got one hardwired and one wireless, and then of course I've got the what's called localhost or 127.0.0.1. If you select the localhost, that will mean the massive meter or the massive meter bridge can only communicate with each other on the same computer. So generally speaking, you don't want to use localhost unless you're running them both on the same computer and you're not trying to connect to other systems. Again, it's recommended that you use a network interface that is wired rather than a wireless system for best performance. Next below that, we have a setting called presets. Presets has a couple of different options here. We've got none, peak, RMS, linear, and D-style. D-style is similar to the Duro style meter. And what this does is when you select one, it sets a set of the preferences below to match what the preset is. So if you pick peak, it'll set a set of the preferences that will match the sample peak meter in Pro Tools. Similarly, if you pick RMS, it will set a set of settings to match the RMS meter in Pro Tools, or linear, or D-style for the Duro style. Below the presets, we have a bunch of different options for customizing the look and feel and the meter types and the meter ballistics. We can display segmented versus non-segmented mode. The meter type we have, so this is actually how the audio signal is measured. So it'll be peak or RMS. With ballistics, we have several different options. For ballistics, we have instant, peak, RMS, linear, D-style, and K-style. The next preference down is the peak hold. You can select 3 seconds, infinite, or none, and this is the floating line or the floating segment that shows where the peak is. The clip indicator has the same settings, so you can do 3 seconds, infinite, or none on the clip indicator. For tick marks, there's quite a few different options so that you can display the increments of the tick marks that you want. We can use all, so that would be 0 to negative infinity and tick marks for each one. We can do every other, so 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, etc. 5s, 10s, and a few other custom ones that match settings for some common meters out there. If you're using the segmented style, you can also pick how many dB per segment. That's 1 dB, 2 dB, or 4 dB. And then at the bottom, of course, you can pick your color for your meter. So let's try a couple examples here. So we'll pick the D-style meter there. So you'll notice that my meter now has segments that are listed for every segment and goes from 0 to -40, and then we have color coding that matches closely matches the Durostyle meter. And we're also using ballistics that closely match the Durostyle meter. We can come over here and we can try, we'll pick linear. So switches off segments, sets the meter type to peak, the ballistics to linear, and a couple of other settings there. And so again, we've got 0 to -60. We're using the increments in 4s, and we have color coding that is similar to what is in Pro Tools linear meter. So if we hop over to the Massive Meter Bridge, we have similar sets of preferences that we can use. Again, we've got the network interface. We've got a couple other ones that are specific to the Massive Meter Bridge. We have an always on top, which will force the Massive Meter Bridge window to float on top of things. This can be really helpful when you're working with Pro Tools that's taking up the whole screen. You can use the always on top to get the Massive Meter Bridge to float on top of Pro Tools. We have a use small header, which takes instead of using the larger system header, it uses a smaller header to optimize for screen real estate. We have a universe view. The universe view essentially hides the device name and again saves on screen space. Segmented view, just like we had in the Massive Meter, and the rest of the settings are just like the Massive Meter. So let's take a look at always on top and use small header. So I'm going to select those two, and we'll have to, for those to take effect, we need to close and reopen our Massive Meter Bridge configuration document. So I'll close it and reopen it, and you can see that we now have a smaller header bar and the Massive Meter Bridge. As I move it down and I click in the Pro Tools, it generally stays on top. The plugins do take precedence of that, the way that Pro Tools is designed. If we bring the Pro Tools session up to fill the whole screen, the Massive Meter will float on top, and you can still use spacebar and keyboard shortcuts and things like that that will be focused into Pro Tools. So working in this mode is really nice because you can resize the Massive Meter Bridge, and as you do, one thing you'll note is when you get down to about this size, the Massive Meter name and the meter labels hide, so we can shrink and shrink and shrink this down really small. We can place it on top of the screen to act as a meter bridge for Pro Tools, and it just floats on top there. And all the same functionality, whether you're rescaling your meters or doing other things like zooming in, all that works just like this. So let's bring ourselves back to our normal view. We're going to open up the settings again, turn off always on top, and use small header. I'll have to close and reopen our Massive Meter Bridge configuration for the settings to take effect. There we go. So the universe view, as I said, it just hides the device names. So if we click on the universe view, you'll see that the device name is hidden, and we end up saving a little bit of screen real estate there, so we can squeeze in more height to our meters. Let's take a look at the segment style. So the segmented style, it applies across all of the meters, and you can see that we end up having some nice segments to instead of a gradient or a solid meter. So depending on how you zoom in on your meter, your segments scale just like that. So again, the same types of settings we have in the Massive Meter, we have in the Massive Meter Bridge, and so you could pick linear style, and it will set everything to be the Pro Tools, kind of be emulating the Pro Tools linear style. Note it doesn't set the color on that, so we would have to go in and manually set colors on our tracks here. Let's reset the colors. I'm going to give another example here where we pick D style, and we can pick our D style coloring. That's a quick overview of the preferences for both the massive meter and the massive meter bridge, and allows you to really customize your look and feel, your measurement type, and your ballistics.